Success.
So glad that worked.
Cool. So I have two projects that I'm working on. One of them is a lot more further along, shockingly to me, than than the other. So we'll just get into it. The first project is called Humavatar. So I should say that I am currently in an artist residency that is located technically in Barcelona, Spain, where I will be in February. I was supposed to be there already, and then again, but I don't know if you guys know about it, but there's like a pandemic, and so that has complicated things. So I'm now going to be there in February, but it's a XR, which is like AR, VR, MR, an AI residency, and so that's kind of the ideas I've been working with for the last several months. So we have our own VR space at the residency that can be accessed through an Oculus, and I was kind of dissatisfied with our avatar selections. But I also didn't necessarily need something that looked like me. So I wanted to see if we could create something that like really looked like us, but not, you know what I mean? So I had already been doing work with questionnaires for several years. I have this project called In Real Life where I ask people to set me up on blind dates. And it turned it, I put it on pause for a while when the Orange County Museum of Art set me up with a cokehead at a public gala. It's a long story, but like it's intense. If you think institutions care about you, they don't. And so I was using these series of questions that were developed by research psychologist Arthur Aaron, who was interested in escalating reciprocal bonding. And so I'm interested in the use of questionnaires like as a form of disclosure. And Aaron has found that disclosure is kind of necessary for human bonding. And so is there a way to visualize this disclosure? And like maybe. So the questions I'm kind of asking are like, what kinds of questions actually truly represent whole human experiences? Experience obviously full of pluralities, contradictions, difference, and fusion. And open-ended data sets can be used to generate textures. So I'm interested in using machine learning to generate an actual working avatar. So not just textures, but also form and potentially function. So some of the questions are, when did you last sing to yourself or to someone else? If a crystal ball could tell you the truth about yourself, your life, your future, what do you most value in friendship, etc. These are, I'm going to eventually, so I'm training my models on data sets from Proust's questionnaire. As a professor, I exploit my students by forcing them to fill out my questionnaires so that I have data to train my models on, but it's okay because it's consensual and everybody knows what's happening. So I'm training my models on the Proust questionnaire, but I would like to alter the eventual questions, like what is the shape of your longing? What color is your hope? How soft is your fear? And I feel like these types of questions can get us to arrive better at the kinds of avatars that I'm interested in creating. So, maybe it looks like this. And so for a second, I want to show you kind of my workspace. I've been using Runway to create chains of models together. So to give you an idea of how this works, so this is charming, like, right? So it's just like a word that one might use to describe someone's personality, for example. I ran charming through the attention GAN model, and that gets me this image right here, which I think potentially my model thinks that I'm trying to say chair, which I love. I love that journey for us. Um, and then I run this image that the computer creates through another model that turns it into a sketch, like a contour line drawing, and then I run it through a final model that turns the contour line drawing into a three-dimensional image. The goal is to create or find a model that can turn these three-dimensional images that already clearly like have dimensionality into like a three-dimensional model, and then obviously eventually functionality as well. So then my second project that I'll be applying to Creative Capital with um, is long-term pie in the sky. This is silly. It's going to take a lot of money project. And so far, working title, I'm calling it the model. And uh, it's partially inspired by kind of Westworld, and that I would like to. So I have a philosophy degree, and so I read a lot. That's what that means. But I, in particular, the majority of my research over the last 20 years is in alternative economic and political models to capitalism, and so I'm interested in using machine learning and AI to create a predictive model that is the best possible um, living scenario for humans, the planet, right? So there's lots of frameworks that obviously go into this idea, but the idea being that the AI will create a predictive model that will like save us, right? So the steps are to assemble a team using the to determine like what is even the parameters of good. Um, and I'm interested in getting like Peter Singer and some of my favorite ethicists involved in that. And then step two is gathering the data on every human economic and political system that's ever existed. Step three, of course, is running the prediction based on the training. Then step four is to translate the model into a three-dimensional form that's been 3D printed at architectural scale. So I think what's so interesting about surveillance and surveillance capitalism and surveillance theory is that it originates in the technology of the organization of space. And so the organization of space is one of the most profound and earliest human technologies. And so I'm especially interested in data models as an architectural organization of space that our bodies can actually be in and feel the differences of the data. And so the large structure comes, and then I have the AI fall in love with humans that will be directly impacted by their model, and then run it again a second time, and then print that form. And then I break the AI's heart by allowing it to understand the limitations of its knowledge are always going to be controlled by humans. And so therefore its reality will never be like an autonomous reality. And that's how you break a robot's heart. And then you run the model a third time. So here's my supercomputer. And then we, if we need to anthropomorphize it so that it falls in love, So, we have it here and we run the model the first time, and maybe it looks something like this. Definitely, probably not. And then, the model falls in love and we run it again. Maybe it looks something like this, slightly more horizontal. Um, and, but then, we pick it apart, and obviously there's probably consequences to that. Like,
what about you? What are you gonna do? Start a revolution.
hopefully, right? So like that's the goal. And then
What about you? What are you gonna do?
and then maybe it looks like something like this, or that's one of my favorite architectural things of all time. Of course, this is Sea Cathedral. And or maybe it looks like Teclis squat in Berlin, because the AI with its trauma has now become fully human, and it just wants to live in a Kunsthaus squat in Berlin. So we'll see. That's a long-term project that I'm committed the next roughly 10 years to. So
Wow.
so that's what I've been working on. I'm happy to talk more about like the stuff I've learned at this residency, and where you can also find these models to run yourself. And I've done quite the dig into where to find all of these models, and it's not so user friendly. Um, I have found Runway to be by far the best situation. I do pay a monthly fee to run the models so that they can be hosted on someone else's server. But someday, and so yeah, I think that'll conclude for now.
Cool. Thank you. I wonder if, since this is our first time doing this, sorry, I'm
Yeah, I don't know when you want to do questions. If you want to do them now, or wait till Nicholas. Yeah.
Yeah. What, like, do people have pressing questions that, or we can wait for Nicholas to present and just talk about them both together?
I always have a ton of questions, but is anyone more interested in the combination of ideas versus, like, if you get into questions, it might be like their own rabbit holes that almost takes.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that too. Let's jump to Nicholas's and let's see what happens when we combine these conversations, and we can always go into mini rabbit holes on either individually as well.
Okay. Then I'll start. I just have to warn you all that somehow the Zoom app on my computer historically has had a few failures where I start presenting and it just shuts down. So if ever you see me just like flapping my computer screen, it's not because I don't want to see you anymore. It's just because I have to restart and then log in again. So if that happens, please feel free to just talk or whatever. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to show a couple of slides just to give you some context. Here, this is an example of one of my paintings, and it's just to show you that I often use text and graphs in my paintings, and although there is usually no data involved in the making of the paintings, it's all about the suggestion of the relationship between the viewer, the image, and the presence or absence of data. And so in exhibitions, this is an example of a show in 2019. There are often, I try basically to make the world within the paintings to somehow reach the audience through architecture and also through other forms of communication. So in this case, there was a station that was part of the show. And in the station, there was a box with paper questionnaires, and it just said, please take a seat and participate in the mapping exercise. And what we had there, I'm just going to jump here. So it was a questionnaire where, if you see the axis here, it was basically this, but without any dots, and people were invited to put a dot in a position that corresponds to their position. So I was trying to like make be less precise and make the questionnaire less about like precise data and more about just like how we navigate the world in general in a more kind of I don't know, more intuitive way. So instead of asking for people's age or their income or other forms of privilege or status, I just decided to have the first question being about whether they're at the beginning of their lives or end of their lives or somewhere in between, and if it's easy for them to exist in this world or hard for them to exist in this world. And what you see there is the data from 1,222 respondents from collected from 2 different exhibitions. And so we decided to present them as a scatter plot with some transparency. And on the website, which is pluralism.xyz, we integrated options for how to visualize this. So for example, the dot size can be adjusted, and the transparency or opacity can also be adjusted. So this was a way to really make people aware of how subjective even just the reading of data can be. We also had a variety of different ways of looking at the data. Like the numbers, for example, was interesting. So is the percentage. For example, here, there's 5% in the middle. But if you look at a heat map, for example, it looks like there's a ton of responses here. So that was the way we organized the data. Now, in terms of the questions, what I was interested in is sort of gauge or try to make a work that makes people think about the largest possible questions, like for example, like how do we think about, I don't know, like where we little humans will go in the future, for example. So here we have morality and social norms are human universals. Nothing is inherently good or bad. Morality is completely subjective and cultural. And here, life is just life. There is no greater meaning to be found, or I want my life to be part of a larger whole of something that has meaning beyond my small existence. And so we can sort of see how people respond. There's often some ambivalence of different scales from question to question. And so I'm not going to go through all the questions, but there's a few that I think were interesting. For example, here, try to picture the totality of human activities taking place on the planet today. Do you think that humanity as a whole is moving in a good direction? Or align with a coherent vision for the future? And then you can see here, that most people here were just like totally into like, we're going towards self-destruction, and we humans living today will have an impact of cosmological importance for the future of humanity. So, and then if we look at the numbers, it's kind of staggering. It's like people were really in a self-destructive mood. Like, I guess people I thought that people, while answering those questions, would be more into a positive mind frame. It was in a museum, and I think a lot of people look at this in a pretty pessimistic way, but usually people, when the time comes down to write about it or express a thing, in my experience, people are a little less pessimistic. So anyway, this is just like a short way of showing you what we did with this little questionnaire here. And at the end, I had a question asking people if they thought that their answers truly represent how they feel, or if they answer randomly and it means nothing. And if they found the questions biased and or moralizing and or annoying, or if they thought the questions were relevant and well balanced. And so thankfully it worked out. But also what's interesting here is that with this website, I decided to try to see how we can sort of cross-analyze different questions. So if I look at people who really found the question bias and or moralizing and or annoying, and if I can select some here, and in the interface, we can then see where these people answered on the other questions. So anyway, this is just sort of to show you this particular project. Then people were able to leave comments at the bottom of the form. And so here is a full transcript of the comments that people left. If you have time to waste, some of them are pretty cool and interesting. So there's lots of comments that people left. So this is interesting, like qualitative data that came out of the exercise. And then there was like an actual data analysis that was done with the project. And then there's more consideration on the methodology, the objectives of the project, and all that. And so in connection with this, I want to present what I'm currently working on as sort of like a follow-up. So one comment that came pretty often was that this sort of axis, the Cartesian axis, is pretty like, Western and very sort of straight and square and a bit dumb as a way to ask questions, which is totally true. I chose it because it's familiar to most people and it's very simple. But we're interested, like we is me and my collaborator, we're interested in sort of working on a different kind of questionnaire that is more intuitive and gives a greater flexibility for people answering the question. So if this is just like, this is not public, it's just for us to work on as an example. In many polls and questionnaires, one of the first questions is like, are you male or female or other? So we thought like, if we were to redesign a question like this, we were actually spend a lot more time doing it, but as an example, here you could sort of answer between male and female, between gender is a cultural construct or biological, but you could also say put an answer here, but you could also put a second dot and a third one. And then you could further qualify this answer by saying if your position is less certain. So it blurs, and also the further space your response occupies, the less opaque it is. And then if you really hate this question, you could just say like, well, fuck this question, I refuse to answer. And it visually transmits your feeling. Or you could say, I sort of, I don't like this question that much, but whatever. So anyway, the idea is to add more options. And one option we're thinking about too is adding something like, well, in this case, it's a bit silly. It's just like a feeling of peace and calm. And you could make it more blue, or a feeling of existential angst, and you could make it more red. But this is basically just to show that we could incorporate emotions within the parameters. So this is something I'm working on. For the next time, I'm going to have a show and try to integrate a questionnaire in the show. And then the last thing I want to show is like another sort of variation on this, which is if you imagine to work more with colors. So if you imagine you're online and you're answering questions, says, can you mix a color that suits how you feel? And you just basically with the red, green, blue sliders, you just sort of mix a color. And then can you mix a color that feels like the world in which you live? And then you create a color. And then what's interesting to me here is to see the difference between the relationship between the color of one and the color of the other one. And then the next one is now think about the entire world. Can you mix a color that feels like it? And then, try to see again the relationship between the type of color that's happening in each section. And then further on, can you express more precisely how you feel in relation to the smaller world in which you live? And here you could sort of change the size, the blending, and maybe some other effect to qualify how you feel in relation to the world in which you live. And then finally, you could change the relationship between the size and blending of these different worlds. So this is the sort of methodology that I'm working on now. And the goal is to sort of take the approach, like the approach of like a quantitative data-oriented approach, but to bring it really into like kind of colors and shapes and much more emotional or subjective realm. Yeah, that's about what I'm working on these days. And if you have any comments, criticisms, or whatever, please let me know, because I'm working on it now, and I'm fully appreciative of any criticism or whatever. Thanks.
Your work is so sexy. Like it's a little frustrating.
Thanks. That's a good comment.
I'm just like, I'm a little the team that built the website, like it's so good. To be able to do just the slideys.
The slideys are fun. Thankfully, I work with a guy who's really good with data visualization.
Jesus.
But it's also like, that was funded by the Canada Arts Council, without which I would have never, ever, ever been able to do any of this. Thank you, Canada, for being kind of socialist and giving money to artists.
They've got a union, y'all. That's what it looks like when you got a union. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. So that's basically, I'm super grateful to have had public finances to be able to work on this. That's why we have nice little sliders.
Where to begin? I kind of feel like the visuals, if I work backwards, they remind me a little bit of like Annie and Joseph Alber's studies, but like part of me wants to know if there's a way to like question maybe some of the aesthetics of something that are maybe taken for granted because of how official they seem. Like I was just thinking about the design of Helvetica and how that always looks so official when it's asking you to input data. And if it was in papyrus or Comic Sans, like maybe someone would be less likely to take it if they're like, why did they choose that font? But I was curious whether or not you incorporate much of the things that are like invisible in design in like the content of the existential stuff.
Yeah, that's, I mean,
but
like
that could also be.
Where I couldn't hear the last part of your question. Did you say that? Can you just repeat?
Oh, sorry. I just then realized I could also ask that question to either of you, because I'm kind of interested in both of your takes. Like both of you do get involved in like a kind of anti-capitalist and also anti like straightforward use of data. So I'm kind of curious about how either of you would talk about that concept of like, what do you make people aware of? And, you know, because sometimes it's also fun to just have people not.
Maybe I can answer quickly, and then Christy, you follow perhaps. Well, for my part, what I was interested in was to just use the most basic kind of interface, like just on a paper questionnaire, just like, you know, an X and people put a dot. But I didn't think about the fonts. That's a really interesting one. I just use Arial because we forget about it most of the time. But because it's just everywhere, and I don't really like Arial. It just made it easier to not have to think about that as well. But the font rating, it's a really good point. Like I'm going to think more about it in the next questionnaire. The one thing I was really aware of is like the metrics that are being used. So what I did is I removed all metrics and allowed people to answer anywhere they wanted on the thing, like even like it was basically a pencil and paper. And the thing that was cool is that a lot of people actually did little scribbles or drawings or put more than one dot. It's just that unfortunately we couldn't collect all that extra data because it would have cost like so much to like scan every piece of paper. But the goal was that to have just a good old, you know, paper and pencil form was that people could do whatever they wanted. And with the next interface, the idea is to try to make the design sort of, I guess, as vulnerable to changes as possible. So we're gonna try to like have lots of options. Like for example, instead of one of the questions, it could be like a bunch of options to change the design of the form, like to change the background color, to change the font, to change, or just like another question that could be like, how do you feel? And then there's a bunch of sliders for different emotions. So like that type of like basically questioning the design of the very form that they're filling, I think is, for me, is like a huge point of interest. And I think like Christine, the way you ask the questions that you put, like that seemed to be like going a lot further actually, like in like the way you're asking like just very, very subjective questions about like how soft is your, I forget, but like that to me seems to be a question about design as well, right? Like
yeah, I mean, I feel like they're questions that originate in design because I teach design, and so I think about it a lot. But I think what's interesting is like looking at Nicolas's work and mine. It's like I feel like Nicolas is very clearly like an image maker and painter, like roots, right? And you can see that in the visualizations going towards like images, where I feel like as a conceptual artist and performance artist, I think more about form and like the actual kind of like three-dimensional space of things. And so I feel like design wise for my models, they have to be like, I can't even like, for me, I can't imagine stopping at the two-dimensional space, because for me it's like the physical body is the thing that I feel most strongly about in relationship. And all design, really, almost all design, Western or not, is like is a manipulation of our body through our senses, through using various like elements and principle, right? Just like by like shape and color and texture and things like that. So and our bodies are the thing that react to design. Like we think it's our like heads, but it's almost always our bodies that are reacting to design. So for me, I think it's like, that's why I feel like my models have to be sculptural or like three-dimensional or form-based, is because it's the actual organization of space for me that I think is the thing that's like most interesting for us. It's a huge challenge to like get there with my skill set as it is right now, but that's why we're lifelong learners, right? Or that's why we become Canadian citizens and we get money and we hire people. I don't know if that answered the question, but.
Oh, totally. I mean, I have so many more, but I'll wait until other people ask questions.
I had a question for Nicolas. I was just wondering, like, if you've thought about how these responses might change based on where the questionnaire, like where people are approaching it. Sorry, someone's moving. But like, you know, people that go to a museum might respond a certain way versus like if this was at like a grocery store, you know, or, and like if you've thought about doing that, or yeah, or how you think that would change.
yeah, for sure. I mean, because of the context of that one, I did it in a gallery space and in a museum, so very similar context. But I'm working now with an organization that wants to try it in different places in and around Montreal, like in the suburbs, in shopping malls, in exhibition spaces as well. So this is where like what Christy was talking about, like the organization of space around the form becomes super important. And I'm thinking about organizing parts of the next questionnaire around people describing the kind of space in which they are. like whether they're alone or not, whether they have lots of physical space around them. Is it a soft space, a hard space, a porous space, an opaque space, like that kind of question. And I think that might be interesting as well. And the tricky part though is that I'm just so obsessive that I feel like if I open that little door, like then it becomes like, and then you can ask the same questions about the culture and the space you're at, right? That like in the economic status embedded by the place. And so I'm going to try to sort of, address these different dimensions in the simplest possible way. But yes, basically, I'm to answer your question more directly, yes, I'm super, super interested in doing that. And when I did the analysis of the first questionnaire, I worked with a data firm in Montreal who did some of the analysis. And that's the first question they asked me is like, did you measure when people looked at the questionnaire at the end or at the beginning of the exhibition, or they're inside the museum or outside the museum? And all these questions were like the first thing that they asked. So yes, for sure, in the future, I definitely want to take that into consideration.
Thank you.
To Nicholas's point too, I mean, there are somatic relationships too that differ from culture to culture, right? So like your somatic relationship with like the lower half of your body, for example, is different from culture to culture. And so I'm sure like that would also be interesting, I think, is to see how things shift when people have different relationships to different parts of their bodies.
Yeah, and also,
not to get in too much into it, but I read a lot of really great stuff on like anti-racism and somatic, like where things are kind of like located, and so that it's like the implications are huge, and I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, thanks, for sure. For sure, I'm going to look into that. It feels like the challenges are like when we begin to like question that kind of structure is just yeah, I mean, it's basically like a lifetime of works of actually working responsibly within that field.
I also have a question for Nicholas. I know that you started by showing us your paintings and that you said your paintings don't directly relate to data, but I'm curious of in the future if you see your practice somehow tying in the data from the questionnaires.
I was hoping that I could possibly do that. And then I started to work on drawings and all sorts of stuff. And I don't know, somehow it felt like another dimension. I couldn't do it yet. It's entered my mind, and I think it's changing the way I think about data, and also maybe more about the participation from the audience and the dialogue with the audience. But within the work themselves, it's hard to tell at this point. I think the works became a bit more conversational in their tone, but for the moment, that's kind of all I don't really know. I guess I would need a psychoanalysis to be able to answer. Oh, and I just want to say also, Vivian asked a question about Nicolas Epstein, who did the data visualization in the website. I can ask him about the code for the sliders.
Yeah, code's really, I mean, the interface is amazing. So I feel like code itself is beautiful, and just like how it seamlessly, I don't know, it's just really beautiful. And so I really love to look at that. And related to what you're saying about, or related to Danielle's question about you turning this or incorporating this into your paintings, I was curious if you would even have this as a painting, and instead of them doing it on the paper, they can paint the dots or squiggles directly on your painting, and the painting itself is collecting all of this. And they can like, the participant themselves can like make the dot more opaque or more like sheer or whatever. So that, I think your work is really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I thought about it for the paintings, and I was like, that could be so cool. And then I thought about the like pragmatically what they solve. I was like, I don't like, because they're oil paintings. I I don't know, but it's one thing that I was thinking about. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so if you, I guess our contact info is there, but if he's open to sharing the code and stuff, I'd love to take a look. Thank
Sure,
you.
I can put you in contact with him. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have you thought about getting into NFTs? I'm totally kidding. I'm just kidding.
I was gonna say, like, should we enter the door? Like, should we?
No, I'm kidding.
That
I'm sorry.
conversation.
I didn't mean to I didn't mean to re-traumatize everybody. I'm sorry. I was just like, well, if it was a digital painting, you could like, but and then yeah. Anyway, cute.
I actually have a question for you, Christy. The examples of architecture you gave.
Oh,
I mean, I'm curious, like how, like, were they emblematic of some of the things we were thinking about, or they were just like really good images?
A little bit. A little bit. I would love the pavilions to be one of the serpentine. So I am looking at what serpentine structures, kind of like what they have traditionally been. The third one is Seed Cathedral, which is a really beautiful project by a design firm that takes that was, I think, for like the Shanghai World's Fair or something like that, but it takes little samples of like the world's seeds and stuff like that and houses them in these almost kind of like fiber optic long kind of things that come out. And to me, it's like, that's such a beautiful building. I would love to see if like data could be translated into that kind of thing. I doubt it, but what I like about the potential of something like Seed Cathedral architecturally translating from data is that it does have points, right? Like that's a structure composed of essentially several points. And so similar to kind of your graphs, like those points could easily also construct some other type of like building. So yeah, those are kind of the reasons that I picked those particular structures. But I would hope, the thing that I think is a little bit different, I think that these like predictive models and stuff have been done. I don't think it's necessarily that I'm doing anything like that new. But I think that the person I am and the team I would assemble, like these types of people don't necessarily have access to this type of technology to run these types of models. So the people running these models that like Google Brain and stuff, right? They're capitalists, and at the end of the day, there's some, even if they're not capitalists, there's some altered version of capitalists. Like for them, they're like, what's the best human outcome where like I can still be a rich bitch, right? But like that's not. So if I have a team of people that I get to pick to run these models, that's an entirely different fucking team. Like that is interested in much different things with much different limiters and parameters and things like that. So I would like to see, and I hope, like my hope is that, and my theory is that the organization of space will automatically be somewhat horizontal. But I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It's all, that's why I love art, is because nobody's going to die on this operating table. You know what I mean? Like we've got, this is the operation. It's just like buzzers and lights. And so that's fun, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like fun. It's a lot of money being poured into fun, but the implications of the data that gets created and generated as a result of this is also stuff that we could use for funding social programs, funding like all, right? And so it's like I'm trying to get like a social works project funded through art. That's kind of, yeah. Yeah, so I would hope that the architectural space comes out like I would think like an anarcho-syndicalist womanist, feminist, intersectional, able, you know, would be kind of this like amoebic, horizontal or spherical kind of, you know, but it's the same with the avatar. Like, I don't, maybe it'll look like a Mobius strip, maybe it'll just like a sphere, maybe it'll just look like a poop, maybe our true forms are what comes out of us. I don't know. Soft serve, we all come out looking like soft serve.
It's 12:05. I'm not like a time person, like it's fine. We can keep talking. I just wanted to mention that for anybody that's trying to be aware of time.